Welcome to Tailor Made with Nancy. I'm Nancy Taylor. I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator, and I've created a series of videos featuring the Rain or Shine Sweet Collection from Stampin' Up with the Playing in the Rain stamp set and die set. You can learn more about the Rain or Shine Sweet Collection at StampinUp.com, or you can find it on page 50 or 51 of the mini catalog. You'll see that the suite includes the stamps and the dies, as well as this raindrop embossing folder, this specialty designer series paper, as well as these really cool loose daisy embellishments. The bundle will only be available for purchase through May 1st when it retires. After May 1st, you can still purchase the stamp set, the die set, and the raindrop embossing folder. In the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see my host code. If you decide to purchase anything from Stampin' Up, please consider using my host code and supporting my business. The item I most strongly recommend you consider purchasing are our Stampin' Blends. They come in sets of 2, light and dark, and blend together, as well as the Wink of Stella glitter brush. We will be using these a lot in these video tutorials. If you're interested in purchasing any of the card kits used for these tutorials, please visit my website, linked in the bottom of this video. Today's video tutorial is going to feature the Playing in the Rain Cling stamp set. We're also going to be featuring the new Stampin' Up online exclusive die set called Radiating Stitches, which you'll soon see will help us make some really beautiful frames. And we're also going to be using the Playing in the Rain die set that corresponds to both the stamps and the designer series paper. Don't worry if you don't have that, you can fussy cut your images. For our next card, we're going to make this fun Flirty Flamingo card using our Playing in the Rain dies, as well as the Radiating Stitch die set. This is a list of the materials that I had on hand when I made these cards. Basically, you're going to need a piece of Flirty Flamingo, a piece of Mango Melody, and a piece of basic white cardstock, as well as a small piece of basic black cardstock where we will stamp and heat emboss our sentiment. As a general rule, I try to start from a whole piece of cardstock and cut it at 5 1/2, and then set one of those halves aside and use one for my card. You'll also need a small piece of white paper to stamp your critter. So we're going to start with a piece of Flirty Flamingo that is scored at 4 1/4. And that, of course, is going to be our card base. If you have a bone folder, you can use that to burnish the edge and get the paper nice and flat. Next, we're going to take our piece of white and cut it in half at 5 1/2. And we're going to line it up with our die from Radiating Stitches. We're going to make a white frame. So to use the Radiating Stitches, you're going to line it up at the end. And because we want to use a frame, we're going to make all these pieces fit together really nicely. We're going to actually use both of the frames. So you want to kind of put them inside of each other. Try to be careful about the positioning. And if you don't center that inside piece, it could make your frame a little wonky. So just line them up as best as you can and run them through the embossing machine. And you'll see that we get a cute little frame and an extra piece that you can set aside and use for something else, different project. Okay. And then we're going to cut down the rest of this piece if you're starting from a whole piece. And we're going to use that for the inside of our card. If you are doing one of my kits, you should already have this paper cut for you, but this is just a basic insert, which is 4 by 5 1/4. Okay, and we're just going to use our adhesive and that right in our card so we don't forget. Okay, now we are going to take our frame and adhere it to the front of our card. So you want to turn it so that you don't see the cut edges as sharp. That's how you know it's the back. And just go ahead and use adhesive. You can use glue. You want to be careful when you put the adhesive on this, because something I've noticed in playing around with this set a lot, which I do, I love this set, is that it will come apart if you're not careful. So you don't want to be rough with this one. And then go ahead and figure out where you want to position your frame. And when you like where it is, go ahead and press down on it. Next, we're going to take our piece of Mango Melody, which is 3 inches by 4 1/4. Basically just the right size for our next rectangle die. And we're going to use that same rectangle that we just used for the inside. And we're going to run that through the Stampin' Emboss machine. Stampin' Cut and Emboss. And we're going to cut out our next frame. Now we're going to put some adhesive on the back and center that right in the middle of our frame. It should fit perfectly. Next, we are going to stamp our critter. I already have my bunny blocked. Go ahead and find your scrap of white. I'm using a 3 by 3. That should be just big enough to fit him. And I'm going to use my Memento ink. I'm using an E block, but this will fit on a D block. If you do it vertically, you want to make sure to get it nice and inked up. If you have a foam pad, I highly recommend using it with any of our stamp sets. I just don't have mine with me right now. Go ahead and stamp your bunny. There we go. And we're going to color him in the same way we colored in the bunny on the last of the bunny cards that we made. So I like to use my Flirty Flamingo for the nose and the ears, and the Daffodil Delight. I like to use the long edge of my Stampin' Blend. I like to start with my light. And if I'm going to use my dark, I like to use my dark next. Okay, just give his nose a little. And then I go back in and blend them. I'm going to leave the ears alone, leave those a little lighter. And I'm going to do the same thing with my raincoat. I like to use the long edge. If you're more comfortable using the bulleted edge, that's completely fine. You find what works for you. I like to color in the entire coat. And then just add a little bit of shadow in the places where I think the shadows would likely fall. Or just to give it a little bit of extra dimension. Our Stampin' Blends are probably my favorite thing that Stampin' Up offers. I think they are really fun to work with. You really get the feeling that you're painting. So remember I told you earlier in our first bunny card that if you're not going to use the puddle, I don't recommend coloring it in. Even though it's fun to use the blends, we don't want to color it in because we don't want to end up with some blue on the foot when we're not going to be having him stand in a puddle. If you want him standing in a puddle, be my guest. Go ahead and color in the blue before you cut it. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to take our die from our Playing in the Rain dies and we're going to cut out our bunny. And if you want to save that little piece for another project, you've got a puddle ready to be used for whatever purpose you might use him for. And now we've got our bunny. Let's go ahead and take our other piece of white. And we're going to use that to cut out our kite using the kite die from our Playing in the Rain dies. And we're going to just run this through the die cutter. And then we're going to take some DSP and we're going to cut out the top layer of our kite. If you want to add some texture, there's multiple ways you can go about doing this. For the card for this one, I used the DSP with the bubbles for the bows, and I used my blending brush to use a little bit of Daffodil Delight ink. I'm gonna give it a try and see what happens if we try to use some of the DSP to do the front of the kite. Let's just try something a little different. See how it works out. You never know. Might be cute. Just to give it a little more dimension. So we're going to go ahead and use the die, the kite front, and we're going to go ahead and use our bows. Make sure they're facing down because it can be a little bit tricky. And I'm just going to line them up on the paper to try to not get the stripes, but just to get that nice marbled flirty flamingo. Just see how it comes out. If we get some stripes, we get some stripes. We'll see how it looks. And we'll run that through the embossing machine. I definitely like doing projects where you're able to put some of your scraps to use. I always appreciate that. Trying not to waste any of this beautiful paper. Try to use every last bit of it I can for something. And then we're going to just assemble our kite. So this one could be a little tricky. I'm going to have to go back and redo that. Oh no, there we go. So took a little bit of figuring out, but basically we just turn it over, put a little bit of adhesive on the back. And assemble. And there's so many options of what you can do. You can make it any color you want. If you wanted to use DSP for both parts of the kite, you can. Just wanted to show you some variations. And then if you have fine tip glue, that's something I highly recommend using for the bows. So being that we're already at this point, I think let's go ahead and figure out where we want to position our bunny. And let's go ahead and start by taking a dimensional and using it on the back of our kite. Now you want to position the kite so that it is right on the edge of the frame. We want to leave enough room for our sentiment. So I like to just kind of figure out where I want things to go. Put it where it feels right to you. How about that? We'll try right in the corner for this one. And then I'm going to also take 2 dimensionals and pop up my bunny. And try to position it so that his hand is over the string. He's kind of leaping in the air there. And then we're going to use our fine tip glue for our bows. You want to just basically get like the smallest little amount of glue right in the dots on the bows. And then figure out where on the kite you want them to go and kind of just push them down. There you go. Okay, so now we have our bows. And the last step, we are going to take our scrap of black and we are going to do some heat embossing, which can seem daunting sometimes. I don't know about you guys, but I find that I don't use my heat embosser as much as I should. But I do like an excuse to use it. So we're going to see how this goes. Hopefully I don't make a giant mess. We are going to take our sentiment, and the sentiment that I chose comes from our Celebration stamp set that many of you may have gotten. It is the Beautifully Happy stamp set, and I chose to use for a feeling better kind of day. You could also do sending happy thoughts. I definitely think this is a really happy card. So go ahead and use whatever sentiment you like, but I'm going to go ahead and use for a feeling better kind of day. I know somebody who could really use some cheering up that would like to receive this card. I'm going to block my stamp, and we're going to start by inking our stamp up in some Versamark, and then stamping our black cardstock. And we're going to shake a little bit of this white powder on. Try not to make a mess. That's the trick, right? And then kind of put it back in here. If you have an embossing buddy, you might want to do that first, but the goal is to basically get it so that you can see your sentiment nicely. And then we're going to go bring it over here to the heat tool and heat emboss it. I'll be right back. I don't know if it'll reach. Let's see. Maybe it will reach. Oh, it will. How about that? Okay, so we're going to turn it on, let it get hot, and try not to set anything nearby on fire. And as it's hot, I love this when all of a sudden it just gets all liquidy. Almost there. There we go. Beautiful. Okay. Not too hard. And then set it down somewhere where it's not gonna burn anything. And then I chose for cutting out this. You can cut it, you can keep it square if you want. I thought this kind of resembled a cloud. So this is from a retired set called Stitch So Sweetly, which you guys may have. And I'm going to go ahead and just run this through the embossing machine to cut this out. After I get my dies off of the machine. Again, make sure that your die is facing down. I can't tell you how many times I have positioned everything perfectly, run it through the machine, only to find out that I've now made a nice imprint on my plates instead of cutting out my paper. Okay. And there we go. Pop that out. And we have our sentiment. And the last step is to put our sentiment on. I just used a little bit of adhesive on the back. I didn't pop it up because I wanted the kite to kind of pop up over it. And just position it where you think it goes best. I like to make sure the stitches are showing, and it's nice to kind of line them up. Since I used all white here, I think it looks kind of cute that the kite is right next to it. Press everything down, and there you go. Card number 4 is done.